Good morning and welcome to the Acquisition HQ online educational meeting. We are joined with a special guest today, Stacy Hendricks. She's an integration strategic professional. She's been doing it for over 30 years. And we're excited to be able to welcome her aboard today to be able to give us really valuable insights as to why it's important to understand pre and post integration strategy. We've been building this company of acquisition headquarters to be the headquarters of education, experience, and all the necessary tools that you would need to be able to do deals, raise capital, deploy capital into off-market deals. And we're excited again to have Stacy with us. Goal for today is to establish purpose and value for the acquisition headquarters for you out there, and then also learn integration strategy with Stacy Hendricks. Who we are, again, the headquarters is a premier hub for business owners, investors, and service providers wanting to build relationships through M&A, through online and in-person experiences. And boy, do we have a great future ahead of us in 2026. We have both our national conferences, which are going to be held in Salt Lake City on March 5th and 6th, as well as in September. And we are advancing forward in our regional efforts to expand into our councils, which are going to be in Austin, Texas, Nashville, San Diego, and Salt Lake City. We had identified some specific problems to this ecosystem, and that was in essence lack of education to increase your understanding of how to do multiple arbitrage, deploy capital, where in some markets this knowledge has been kept or is not readily available, which is what we've done with our entire platform. So the lack of education, which then has enabled us to bring in the right people to deploy that education. So we then are building trusts and teams to execute that information and also execute on deals. Our current traction last year, we did release our September 3rd national conference, which we felt did a wonderful job. We then created a private network off of that has 90 members, and those members are ranging anywhere between, seasoned operators that have companies anywhere between 2 to 50 million in EBITDA, private equity investors, holdco founders, and we also had completed our fall tour, which we hit 6 different cities across the nation, and then are finished up in Salt Lake City. Last year, and this isn't on there, we actually hosted 22 different events in 15 different cities to expand the reach of the brand of acquisition headquarters. We then launched 2 city councils, and then we've got Acquisition 2026, which is currently launched. Again, this is where we're going. There'll be more information after Stacy's presentation about our membership, but also the councils and also the national conference that's coming soon. So we're really excited about that. But at the end of the day, we have individuals that are very good at what they do, and we want to be able to present them to you. Stacy Hendricks is a trusted advisor and the CEO of Amplify Global Consulting with over 30 years of experience helping organizations navigate growth, transformation, and M&A. Prior to founding Amplify, she held senior M&A and integration leadership roles at Alvarez and Marshall, McAfee, HP, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and Samsung Next, leading transactions from small tuck-ins to complex and as well over 3 dozen multi-billion-dollar cross-border deals. Earlier, she ran her own consulting firm, advised clients across 6 continents, co-founded a biofuel company in Africa, and led marketing and PR for technology nonprofit organizations. Stacy holds an MBA in international business from the Monterey Institute of International Studies, a bachelor's from Texas Christian University, is ProSci certified, and a published writer. Welcome to the Acquisition HQ educational session.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do is we'll pull up your slides, and then you'll have the floor for our audience out there, okay?
Great. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. All right, can you see that?
Not yet.
Just give me a second. There you are.
Still coming up for me. I think you can skip to the third page. So today, what we're going to talk about. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. Happy to chat with anybody who's watching the live stream today. What we're going to talk about today is talking about value-led integrations and how to create value through proper integration strategy. And so we're going to cover a few things today, including why some integrations fail, some common mistakes that people make on the front end of deals, some basic integration strategy fundamentals, talk about value first integration, and then we're going to get into a little bit of the mechanics, which is what people commonly refer to as the 90-day playbook. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and why a 90-day playbook can actually be a fallacy, and you can get into murky areas there. And then we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into change management and communications, and finally talk about some early warning signs and course correction. So why do integrations fail? So this next slide, I've got some stats on here that talks about the fact that the failure rate for M&A is really high. It's between 70 and 90%. It's a well-known stat. Here are some supporting stats, though, that talk about if you actually do integration strategy correctly, that you can really increase your success rate. We're going to talk, the next slide is going to talk a little bit about some of the common mistakes, but if you actually can do some correction up front, you can really increase your chance of success. So up to 85% if you've got a successful integration that's been well planned, that has a structure around it, with integration plans that are well defined, linked to specific metrics, and that prioritize value creation. You can really increase your chances of success. So let's talk on the next slide about what some of the issues are that lead to value leakage. So value leakage essentially is when synergies, growth, and efficiencies don't materialize. And so there are so many mistakes that you can make through the course of an integration, but here are a couple of really common ones. Probably the one that I see the most, especially coming in, sometimes I'll come in to clean up an integration that hasn't gone well, or that just wasn't fully integrated in the first place. Or training teams that have had some missteps on past integrations. And the biggest one is that integration is treated like an execution task and not a strategy. It's a checklist. It's a project plan and not a strategy. And that's a big mistake that I think most junior teams or folks that haven't done integration before, that's the biggest mistake that they make. Or mistaking day one readiness for your full integration. So day one readiness, you've got everybody on the payroll, you've got them cut over to an ERP system, and integration's done, right? That's actually not the case. That's the start of it. That's a task completion, but integration is so much more than that. Immediately after close, you're going to lose attention of the leadership team, which has been, really working hard to get the deal done. But that's where the real work begins, is right at close. And so that's a big mistake. The biggest area that I see people really, really stumble is overlooking the people side of things and what we call the softer side of integration. Culture and talent risk cannot be underestimated, and it is the area that I think people really struggle with the most. Really understanding that the difference between culture, communication, and change management, and how those are not the same thing. So we're going to talk about that today. And then, system integration, driving everything, driving the timeline. It shouldn't be the task driving the timeline, but the way that you're creating value. And that's what we're going to talk about today a lot through the course of this hour. And then finally, synergies that exist on slides or in a spreadsheet, but not in operations. So how does that flow throughout everything that you're doing? How do you operationalize your synergy plan, and how do you actually have a value capture plan? A lot of people don't understand even how to track or make sure that they're even achieving the synergies that they've laid out. And so those are some really common mistakes. And why that's so dangerous is because this can really back up on you. It may not be really visible at first, but it compounds over time, and just the task completion can create a sense of false confidence. And I think that's where people really get into trouble, is looking at integration as task completion, when it's so much more. And so it's, I find that people are surprised later when they look at the numbers and they don't add up to the value that they thought they were buying or creating, because they haven't really created any. They've completed a task without the hard work of value creation. So that's the value leakage problem. Let's talk about what we can do about that. And we're going to start with some fundamentals and defining a little bit, just kind of some of the basics of integration and integration strategy. I think that's important to just set the stage for what we're talking about here. That integration is not just people, process, and technology. It's bigger than that. You've got to start with strategy and goals. That has to be woven throughout absolutely everything that you're doing. So really understanding where and how value is being created, and what the value drivers of the deal really are, and weave that. And that's what creates your strategy. And then you've got processes, systems, and people. But then you also have culture, which is another leg of the stool that is absolutely critical in integration. You've got brand, which is sometimes its own character in the play here. And then the value creation levers themselves. So this is the way that I kind of think about integration. And we talk about, effective post-merger integration, or PMI, really starts before close. It is not a 2 days before close exercise. And I often am brought in right before close, immediately before close. And we should have been starting before diligence. We should have been doing a lot of the hard work and deep planning and deep strategizing, because by the time you hit close, you've already lost a ton of value if you haven't started planning yet. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. So this goes back to looking at integration strategy as an execution task or as a checklist. Project management, I often see folks listing job descriptions as integration project manager when they're actually needing somebody to do integration strategy and be a strategic integration leader. And the difference is that project management is a piece of integration, but it is by far no means what you're executing. And I think it's important to really understand the differences and the nuances between those two things, because if you don't, then it's really difficult to actually execute a strategy if all you're doing is managing to a project plan. And so this kind of lays out a little bit of the nuances, but really, strategy is alignment of vision, goals, operations, culture, resources to achieve strategic objectives. Project management is tactical task execution and management. There's a really big difference there. And there's a big difference in the focus, scope, approach, goals, and the way that you think about change in all of those things. So I'm not going to read the depth of the slide, other than to say, really thinking about this in a more strategic light sets you up better for really integrating a wholesome and a fulsome integration strategy. So what does integration strategy actually mean? How are we really defining that? So it is not just acquiring a company and hoping for the best. That's not strategy. That may be integration, but that's not integration strategy. So how do we define that? That's how, where, and how fast two or more organizations are combined to realize value. It is not a project plan. It's not an IT checklist. It's not an IT roadmap. It's about making intentional trade-offs, so value is captured on purpose and not by accident. And so really think about this in terms of 4 questions. What value are we trying to realize? And if integration decisions aren't tied to that, you're going to have more noise than you're going to have returns. Then how much integration is required to realize that value? Do you need to fully integrate? Can you hold it as a separate company and let them be standalone? What drives that decision? Whatever is creating value should drive the decision, not the whim of the executives or who they'd like on the reporting line. It needs to be what's creating value to determine what kind of integration strategy you're going to pursue. Then you can start talking about how fast should you integrate and in what order. That timing is really critical for success and for determining if you're going to achieve value. And then, most importantly is we don't want to break the companies that we're buying, crushing the butterfly, so to speak. So what can you do or what must not be broken in the process of this? You can completely destroy the value of a company by doing this. And I'll give an example. I had a client this year that was a financial services firm and had never done acquisitions before. We're kind of winging it. And one of the groups that they had acquired the year prior had a 5-year earnout for the owner, but changed a bunch of the policies afterwards. And his earnout was tied to revenue and to customer retention. But a year later, they'd lost 50% of the revenue and 50% of the customers. So his earnout was blown. The value of the company is blown because there wasn't an integration strategy and that wasn't discussed. They weren't talking about how to protect the value of that asset and not only protect the value, but then increase the value. So there wasn't a plan around that. And that's where I think people get into trouble and you can really, blow the money that you spent on the deal and could ruin another company in the process. So speaking to the 4 these are 4 common models. When we're talking about how much to integrate, how do you decide that? And what are we talking about really? So there are really four models. One is full absorption, brand, employees, operations, systems, everything. Next would be selective integration. So some functions are integrated while others might be left alone. Often that's the case where you'll see back office integration, but front of house, so to speak, or sales, customer facing operations are left alone while administrative tasks are integrated. You've got a holding model where this is more typical with some PE firms where it's a standalone company. You're not integrating it into another strategic company. So it's strictly an investment. And then you've also got kind of a grow the business model where you really want to protect the company and leave it mostly standalone, but grow it and expand it. And so there are different times to use each of these models. When full absorption really makes sense, when cost synergies are the big driver, the operating models are similar, sales motions are similar, things like that, where you're not going to completely break something by absorbing that company. Often this is the case with direct competitors. That's a really good example of a time where that works really, really well. Selective integration would be when you have something that's synergies that are a little bit more targeted, maybe. Maybe most of your synergies could be on the revenue side. The value drivers really aren't cost, but you can achieve some cost synergies by integrating your ERP systems or integrating payroll, handling the administrative task, but letting the business do what they do and keeping their special sauce preserved. Holding model is really the portfolio model of a financial owner. This is also the case that you may have if there are regulatory issues that require a stark line between two businesses. That's another time when that may fit. And then preserve and scale. This is where innovation, growth, talent, it may be the thesis here. There are lots of times to do this, not integrating at all and not even integrating on the back end. Usually is the case when you have two businesses that are really markedly different in terms of the kinds of products or services they're selling. Maybe it's something in the vertical value chain where you're integrating you're purchasing one of your suppliers, but it's really a different business. That may be a time to utilize one of those models. So you have to think about what is the deal thesis and what are the value drivers, not what do we think we should do with this, how do we want the reporting structure to look? That should be a symptom of whatever, or an outcome of whatever the integration model you choose to pursue, which should fall out of the deal thesis and the value drivers. So let's talk about value first integration. I just want to spend a little time on this slide. So what is value first integration? We talked about strategy, integration strategy. This is where you design integration decisions around where value is created, protected, or at risk. So putting value first, putting where you're creating synergy, where you're reducing risk, where you are optimizing efficiencies, where is the value being created? What are you maximizing here? Rather than creating an integration plan around functions, systems, org charts. So you want to make sure that your integration effort is really proportional to impact. So kind of broken these into 5 categories here. The first one is what we typically think of when we think of value creation: cost synergies, revenue synergies, capability synergies, and risk reduction. And we'll talk about these in a minute, but it shouldn't just be to integrate. The decision should be driven by where the value is being created. And so this is kind of really explicit, easy to see sources of value. So let's talk about some of these other ones here. So value-driven sequencing, what does that really mean? This means looking at how you can phase integration and why you may want to do that. Maybe creating the things that are more visible, customer-facing, value-creating activities, quick wins, putting those up front and holding on some of the other decisions or some of the other integration points. IT can be extremely expensive in an integration. So you have to think about, you may be getting some cost synergies from an IT standpoint, but you've also got lots of costs to achieve and one-time costs. And so you have to really think about not only where the value is creating, but where you're going to have to invest to be able to integrate, and then the timing of that. And so value sequencing is a really important piece of this, value-driven sequencing. And then let's talk about accountability. So accountability is ownership. Who's going to own the value levers that we're talking about? I worked with another company this year that had kind of a single page of value creation activities, no owners, no work streams. They were kind of not really clear about who was going to be driving those things. Therefore, nobody had accountability over them, right? And so really understanding, and from the get-go, understanding which work stream they're falling under, which company, who's owning it, what the timing is, and creating ownership and accountability around that, so that the value is actually realized later, when you're doing your value delivery and capture, and they're reporting that to the management team, not the integration lead kind of being on the hook for reporting on all of that. You really want the ownership of synergy delivery to be in the functions that they're being created. So differentiated or integration, integrate aggressively where the value's unlocked, but maybe think about it where there's not as much value and it's a nice to have, but it's not necessarily going to create value. So again, this is a prioritization exercise, and also just maybe leaving some things on the table and not integrating them because it's not value creating. So really think about what that value is and make decisions from there. And then we talk about re-anchoring, really having this be a continuous process. So I'll give another example. I had a 2-year integration. It was pretty long tail on several fronts. And so it was lengthy, it was complicated. And we were continuing to integrate on that synergy plan that entire time. And we continually found additional dollars. The original goal was $5.5 million, and we ended up landing $35 million in synergies because we continued to keep looking for additional sources of value that were based on our original value drivers. And so that continual process can unlock value as you go. It's not a one-time exercise. So let's talk about synergies really quickly. So the way that we think about synergies is 1 + 1 = 3. So, I get kind of tickled when I hear people talking about, we just acquired this company's revenue, but they don't talk about synergies, how they're going to amplify that revenue. They're just thinking of it as another revenue stream for their current company and the existing revenue stream that company has, but not thinking about how they can maximize not only revenue and cost for the company that they're acquiring, but for also, you've got an opportunity to do that with the parent company as well. If you look at best of breed, that company may really have some value that you can integrate into the parent company, that would change things for the parent company as well, additionally amplifying. And so really thinking about all of the ways that you can go and find value. And so I'm kind of breaking that into 4 types here, which I won't go into in detail, but cost synergies, revenue synergies, financial synergies, and then capability synergies. And there are so many places that you can go find these gems and points of value in a company. But you've got to do the work, and you've got to do the kind of deep dives into all of these different areas to go look for it. And so there's lots of value to be unlocked if you know the right questions to ask. And so really encourage people to deep dive on the synergies and really focus on that. So let's talk about 90-day playbook. This is kind of the bane of my existence, I have to tell you. I am not a fan of the term 90-day playbooks, but I really wanted to talk through it a little bit and talk about why there is still, and some people will call them 100-day playbook, why there's still a need for that as a tool in your arsenal, not the entire tool. So 90-day playbooks. So why are they still relevant? Why do they work? One of the reasons is it really focuses prioritization very early. So it gives you that kind of robust plan, but you've got to do that work before close. That's not an immediate post-close exercise. You've got to have a solid plan in place, shortly after diligence. And that's why I really encourage people to bring their integration leads into the diligence process and be able to integrate those teams. So it focuses prioritization and early focus, really helps create the momentum and accountability It allows you to surface risk early. And then most importantly, it really anchors the integration to your deal thesis. And so, it does have value as long as you've done the pre-work prior to close to make sure that that plan hangs together. And as long as that is not the entire plan, because I've yet to see a single deal that has completed integration in 3 months. There is always work to be done past that. I've worked on a lot of large complex deals, but even smaller deals a lot of times will have lingering things that go past 3 months. And so 90 days is a bit short-sighted if you want to really bring the value out of a deal. So why are 90-day playbooks a fallacy? Let's take a look at that next. So it gives you a false sense of completion. So 3 months, we're done. 3 months is you're kind of out of the weeds, basically, if you want to talk in kind of restaurant terms. I really think of that as that's you getting started. You're confirming your plans. You're revalidating. You're validating. You're tweaking, adjusting, and then after the 90 days, that's when you really hit the ground running on the hard work of integration. So I think it really encourages over planning and under learning. It's puts a playbook in place, but instead of iterating and really diving in to learn more about the organization and learn where you can find additional value, it kind of stops you at that short-sighted plan. So I think it's also biased toward activity over impact. Let's check things off a list rather than let's carefully plan and make sure that we're really wringing the value out of a deal. Another big piece of this, and we're going to deep dive into culture in a minute, but another part of this is that it really can mask cultural risk and some of your people risk because you're really focused on achieving those tactical plans. And so, what can you do? I wouldn't treat 90-day playbooks as the finish line. Instead, linking each phase to value and combining time-based and value-based metrics. So, and I'm definitely not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is just to say, this is kind of what a full integration looks like. You've got a lot of work. If you can see more than half of the page is pre-close work. And you see all of those deliverables and all of that planning that goes into getting you even to a place where you can start a 90-day plan. And then once you've kicked your 90-day plan off, which we'll go into next, then that's where you start more work. But there's a ton of work that goes in to pre-close integration planning, and that should be a big focus for the team, and need to make sure that you're bringing the team in at the right time. So this is a really high level look at what a 90-day playbook might look like. Every deal is different. I have never worked on a deal that's the same as another deal. They are markedly different. I am always surprised. I always am learning something new that I haven't learned on a previous deal. So, this is a framework that may apply, looking at how you stabilize and protect immediately after close, validate and align, and then integrate and scale. But this may be too aggressive of a timeline. And where I would encourage people to err is on the side of caution and planning. It's okay if people aren't on payroll on day one. It's okay if they aren't on the same systems on day one. They can still operate. They've been operating just fine. And so take your time, do some planning, make sure that you are really tying everything that you do and every single decision that you make to value creation, and use this as a guideline and not the end goal. So deep dive into change and communications, which is an area very close to my heart. And I'm spending time on this because I think that it's probably the most overlooked and the most misunderstood piece of integration. And I think it's where the most value is actually lost, because the people that are executing on your value creation activities, whether they be revenue, cost, efficiencies, anything, they're the people in your company. And if you're not paying attention to what's going on with the people that you tasked to do this, you're going to lose the value flat out. And so we really want to think about how to concentrate our efforts here too, and make sure that these are being covered. So what's the risk? You could lose people. Attrition is the number one risk. You could lose high performers, single points of failure. Passive resistance is a big one, where you start to lose productivity. It erodes trust, and you can get some real toxicity going. Shadow organizations are not uncommon, where you've got processes and systems that are now kind of operating separately that you don't even know about. People are kind of doing their own thing and no longer have an open dialogue and an open line of communication with management, which leads into customer disruptions and can lead to customer disruptions, which is, could directly lead to loss of revenue. And slower decision making. I mean, this is a big one. You want to be able to have people that feel empowered, excited. It's a big deal to acquire a company, and it's a big deal to be acquired. And you want to bring people along on that journey with you. So let's talk about what change management is. We're going to talk about the difference in communications and change management a little bit deeper on the next slide. But this is the way that I think about change management. It's holistic. So it's not just communications, which is absolutely the only thing that I see in the majority of integration plans. There's a communication plan, but not a change management plan. So what does that include? That includes leadership enablement, which is your managers are on the front lines. Those are the people that are going to deliver the change and manage the change. And so bringing them along and making sure that you're empowering your leaders is absolutely, absolutely critical. And then the cultural integration piece is the most overlooked, the most misunderstood. And then thinking about resistance management and business readiness. So business readiness includes things like learning and development, training, making sure that people are actually equipped to do the new jobs that you're asking them to do. And all of this comes back to really assessing and understanding and being supported by data that can bolster a plan. So why is change management not like communications? This is on the next slide. Or it's not the same thing. It's a piece of it. So it's a subset. But change tells you, communications tells people what is changing. Change management ensures people actually change. So it empowers and enables the change. Communications is an information alignment tool, but change management is what creates, helps drive the behavior that you're actually trying to enforce here. So the risk here is that people understand the change, but don't adopt it if you only use communications. And if that's ignored, then people just will continue to do things the way they've always done them, and the change won't get filtered down throughout the organization. So these missteps happen mostly after people are informed, and you start to lose people. They start shopping their resumes around. Culture, incentives, decision rights, that really determines outcomes, not messaging. Messaging is a tool. It's a great tool, but it shouldn't be the only tool. Let's go to the next one. So let's talk about culture. Culture is considered soft, fuzzy. It makes people uncomfortable when we're talking about it. I've worked with very, very large companies that did not want to take a cultural assessment because they didn't want to turn the lens on themselves. Didn't want to look at that. So you've got a problem there if you don't have a baseline and you can't really, uh, objectively look at whether cultures are aligned or not. There's no data, there's no system to actually assess whether the cultures are aligned. So the risks of that are it can cause delays because culture is decision making speed. So it can cause delays, rework stalls, resulting in missed synergies. It shapes behavior. It enables collaboration. It drives talent retention and flows to customer interaction. So what does that mean? People revert to their old behaviors. It can undermine customer interaction. So cross-selling, interactions with the customer, it can completely block things like that because there's a culture mismatch and behaviors are not altered in any way. We've talked a lot about talent leaving, and that's super typical if culture is ignored. And then, in the end, it can lead to just straight up lead to loss of revenue and a negative impact on your reputation. So I wanted to dive a little bit more into this. So I'm going to use another example from this year. I had a company that I worked with, and they said that culture was absolutely the most important part of their integration, and why they acquired certain companies versus others. And it was the most important part of how they integrated. So first of all, didn't have any kind of assessment and didn't have any measure of culture or a really understanding of what that was, and did absolutely nothing in the course of their integration to foster culture, combine or integrate cultures. So that statement was really just a hollow statement. What they were basing it on was really gut feel, and it was interaction with one or two executives, and that was about it. So wanted to just kind of talk about this a little bit. Gut feel, intuition. This can be based on things like leadership impressions, anecdotal conversations, even what the office looks like, how people are dressed. Do they have town halls just like we do, that kind of thing. Those are really superficial indicators that do not dive into what actually drives culture, which are things like behaviors, norms, decision-making, risk tolerance, things like that, that are drivers of culture. So there are a ton of mistakes that people make when we're talking about culture. One of the biggest ones is that it'll all gel over time. It'll happen. I heard that this year from a German client, and they were talking about integrating with a Canadian company and just assumed it would work out without any oversight. And it's a huge mistake. Thinking that they're just going to join our culture and be happy about it. And that's an oversight. There are lots of other mistakes here that we talk about when culture, misaligning incentives, treating it as one thing instead of sometimes multi subcultures, over relying on senior alignment, things like that. So there are so many things to get wrong here. It's such a big place to trip. So let's talk a little bit about cultural integration and what you can do on this front. So what cultural integration looks like. If you look at this dial here, this really talks about what culture is. And it's so much more than one thing. Values, norms, priorities, how people make decisions, risk and change, beliefs, all of this goes together to form the culture. And so what do you do about that? Because this has to drive your integration strategy. This has to support the value that you're creating. So how do you do that? Looking at current state of both your target company and the parent company, and being able to compare that both pre-close and post-close, outlining what you want the culture to be and what you're expecting it to be, modeling that once you've got that, and then thinking about how to embed that into your processes, systems, everyday life. What does that look like? And having a plan around that. And then potentially being able to incent people on that helps be able to carry your value creation plan across the line because people are in with you on the culture. So a couple of tips: identify non-negotiables really early, define where flexibility exists and where you can move and shift, address friction proactively, and then think about tools like culture friction maps, which you could do by function, and it can be part of your early planning process where you're really looking at places that might be problematic and having your team help you solve that and co-create a solution with you. That is how you create lasting value. So early warning signs, let's talk through this a little bit. There are people and culture, systems, processes, synergies, customers, decision-making. There are lots of early warning signs that value is starting to leak, which means your integration strategy needs to be tweaked. And this goes back to the continuous improvement. So what are let's talk through some of these. So people and culture, if you have a lot of high performers leaving, that's an immediate, obvious sign that something might be wrong in the way that the integration has been structured or executed. The persistent us versus them language, that goes straight back to culture. And that can continue for years after a merger unless it's managed. Managers avoiding integration decisions. So cultural friction is a big one. Systems and processes, again, this goes back to systems dictating the plan and not value. So where you've got manual workarounds, data inconsistencies, things like that, that could signal a problem. Now you're going to have some of that anyway as a point in your integration, but it's how long it persists. I think in your ability to pivot off of that or really have an interim and an end state that are very clearly defined. So that's it's part of the integration. It's also a warning sign. So it's important to understand kind of the difference between the two. And then decision making and governance. So when people aren't sure who is making the decisions, who they're reporting to, what the governance structure is, who's doing what. This gets really cloudy really fast. I like tools like a decision matrix that outlines authorities, approval levels, areas, risk areas, things like that, that really clearly outlines decision-making authority, which can be hard for target companies to hear and see. But if you can get a handle on that early, that can help you get past some of these early value warning signs. Synergy execution. There are lots of minefields here, but missed or delayed synergies, no clear owners, not being able to track and measure. That's a problem for you. Can't. That means value is theoretical. It's not being translated into real life that you can actually prove. So that can signal a warning. Customer complaints. So going into customers, if your sales teams are having issues, the sales team's complaining, your customers are complaining, you're seeing customers exit or deals aren't closing that you expected, those can be early warning signs that you need to make some adjustments. So what do winning integrators do? Early intervention is really key here. So making sure that you catch things at the outset when risks appear, and take care of them early. Make quick decisions. I always keep going back to the deal thesis. In fact, when I do team meetings, I usually have my first slide is a reminder of the deal thesis and the value drivers, and people get so tired of seeing it, but re-anchor to that, remind people why we're doing this, what is the value, and keep re-anchoring to that in whatever way makes sense for you. That's just a visible way to do it, but that's a good way to do it. Adjust the integration pace if you need to, slow down if you need to, accelerate if you need to. So there are pace issues that can help here. People and culture, address those head on. Have a plan for that. Have a plan for when things go wrong, and be able to address that proactively. Clarifying ownership and decision rights, I think we've talked about that. And then just continue to reinforce governance and cadence, I think is really important here too. And with that, I will wrap up. So key takeaways, I'm going to just hit the big ones here. Integration is a value strategy. It's not a checklist. It is not a project plan. It's playbooks and project plans are different. And a playbook isn't the strategy either. A playbook is a framework. And so really thinking about it as value strategy, not a checklist. First 90 days is not your whole plan. It's the beginning of the plan. Change in culture are hard risks that have to be proactively managed. And then, early signals matter more than lagging indicators here. Catch things early and you've got a lot better shot at hitting your value plan. That's it.
I'd like to ask just a few questions about this.
Okay.
Excellent presentation, and thank you so much again for being here. Over all of the various transactions that you have consulted on, is there a combination of probably top three or maybe the biggest thing that you're seeing, that people are making a mistake on? Is there anything that comes to mind that you've seen in over your time?
Yeah, it goes back to what I kept saying in the presentation. It's this notion that integration is project management,
Mhm.
and really thinking about it as a task-based exercise, right?
Mhm.
And I've even seen people that have value creation plans that treat that as a project plan, right? And don't tie it there where there are no integration goals. I actually had a group say to me this year, we don't know why we did this deal. Nobody's ever told us. So they had no idea
Wow.
why the company was purchased, what the value drivers were, what the strategy behind it was. That's a problem, especially if the people that are executing that don't know why they're doing it. And you haven't been able to really clearly articulate that value to the people that are impacted, especially the company that you're buying. I mean, they have to know that their universe is being like upended for some reason.
Yeah.
And so I think really treating it as a task list is a big mistake.
Well, I think a lot of times, like you were saying earlier, people's emotions will also get in the way, whereas they see the revenue or they see the potential of growth
Right.
that revenue is going to give their portfolio company when they add another business and they're not actually looking at what it's actually going to take. I know for a fact you've seen that multiple
Yeah,
times.
absolutely. It's you're seeing dollar signs, but you're not seeing the people. And M&A is all about people. And you can treat it as a money exercise. You can treat it as a spreadsheet, but you're going to lose. You're going to lose big time in that equation. And have seen some big companies make big missteps this way too, where never had a change management function, barely had communications even to support, treated an org design process as a cattle call, basically, and where are we going to bag and tag people, basically,
Mhm.
and you erode the value of the deal because people don't want to stay, and they don't want to be in an environment where they feel like a number, and they don't understand why they're there, what they're doing, what the purpose is, and they're not excited about staying. And so, not treating it as a full people exercise is a massive oversight.
Yeah. Well, I'm here as one who, for example, I'm going to put myself in a seat of one who's about to make that acquisition right now. What is my first step that I should do, and how long should I, prior to, I know you had that list up there, but I want to hear it from
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
What
sure.
what should my first step be, and looking at a potential acquisition, and when should I plan for what I'm about to execute?
Sure. So I think that people think about, oh, we need outside help for transaction execution, right? We need help sourcing, we need help structuring the deal, we need help on the legal side and the contracts. That's the same time you need to bring in an integration person. I mean,
Perfect.
not when you're sourcing the deal, but you really need to have an integration partner. If you've never done a deal, going it alone is the equivalent of like doing open heart surgery on yourself. It's
I love
it's
that.
um it's
Yeah.
absolutely insane. You don't want to go in and be messing with something that where you don't really understand all the mechanics of it and don't understand all of the ways that you can, clip an artery in that process, right? We're talking about we're staying with that analogy. And so, really the best time to bring in an integration expert or your integration team, or at least an integration lead if it's internal, is really before you do the full confirmatory diligence. So you've done your initial diligence. You've got, usually people will have an LOI in place now that there's maybe a clock that starts running on an exclusivity, 30 days, 60 days, something like that. It's a really good idea to bring your integration lead to participate in diligence. They can help you shape some of the diligence questions and add things in there about culture, do some assessments on the front end, do some risk assessments on the front end from an operations and an integration standpoint, have them participate in
That's so
100% of
good.
that confirmatory diligence. And then by the time you're done with diligence, they've already got probably a good integration person will have a good hypothesis about the kind of integration strategy. The way that I usually work with the execution team is we do a joint integration and diligence kickoff, and we agree on what is this, what are the value drivers, why are we doing this deal. We create that language together, and agree on that, and we have a bit of a hypothesis about how we might integrate. We lay that out for everybody participating in diligence, and then we've got that in mind. Now we're already thinking with the end goal in mind. We're not just thinking about the end goal is close, which is what a lot of diligence, the purpose of diligence is to, are we going to get to close? But it really should be, how are we going to create value out of this company, and can we do that? That should be
Post-merger.
the goal,
Yep.
right?
Yep. 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 Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing so much in the space, that we're in right now, with a lot of people just making hasteful decisions, wanting to acquire companies, and
Right.
obviously more seasoned, mature individuals take patience, time, and tactfulness to make that acquisition. So, anyway, again, I appreciate you being here on this live. And for everybody else that's watching this, whether it's live or recorded, again, we thank you for being a
Thank you.
part. I want to share real quick before we hop off about the network that we've developed, and then also the conference that's coming up, which we're very excited about, in Salt Lake City Acquisition Conference, or AquaCon. First is the network. It's a private network that's off of our national conference. And then what's happening within our network, both online and in person, is number one, if you are a part of our network, have access to the web app and community. Two, you have curated introductions to strategic partners, or those that, one, would want to do a deal with you as far as investors. Two, you'll have other seasoned operators that you can connect with and do knowledge share and be able to mastermind with, as well as, when you guys have, and if you are making a confirmation now to come on board, you will receive a free entry into our AHQ council meetings across all cities and all states. that we launch in 2026, as well as you will receive a VIP ticket to AquaCon. We only have 50 of those available, and we're excited again for the conference coming in March. This is just a screenshot of the actual app that you have access to. And within the app, there's multiple channels. And again, we've got about 100 members that are a part of that now. This just is a spreadsheet that allows for you to understand the differences of value, both a non-member or a member. And the non-member is, in essence, you have access to our biweekly educational sessions that are distributed across all social channels, but nothing else. The private community is for and vetted for individuals that are either holdco founders, seasoned operators, or investors, and also M&A service providers that are looking to help those individuals with their deals in a very strategic manner. Again, this is our national conference. It's a two-day event, M&A leaders and deal makers, workshops, and panel discussions. We'll have a deal expo. There's a private VIP dinner at a really nice place that we've rented out called the Hale Center Theater, and current early bird registrations are available for you out there. If you have any more questions about the network or about Acquisition HQ as a whole, feel free to just head on over to acquisitionhq.co/network. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our events, whether it's online or in person. Thank you again, Stacy.
Thank you.
We
Thank you
cannot
for having
wait.
me. Appreciate it. It was fun.
We will send this out to others that are a part of the network as well. And yeah, it's been a great time.
Thank you.